from Fix the Debt Virginia. Former Democratic Party of Virginia Chairman Brian Moran and former Republican Party of Virginia Treasurer and businessman Brian Plum. Good morning to the two Bryans, and we will address you as Mr. Moran and Mr. Plum.
The Bryans.
Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Great to have you with us, and we're excited about your bipartisan effort. If I could go to start with Mr. Moran and give our listeners kind of an outline of what Fix the Debt is and how the organization came into being.
Good, thank you. Well, it came into being because there is a national crisis right now that we are accumulating a debt at the rate of $2 billion a day, and it's just immoral to pass that IOU on to our children and their grandchildren. So it was created in response to that crisis. It's been led by a group of national group, Senator Simpson and then Erskine Bowles, who came up with the Bowles-Simpson plan to address the debt, and now Fix the Debt as a national organization in all 50 states. Here in Virginia, we have people like Delegate Ken Plum, a Democrat. We have former Senator John Warner. So we have Democrats and Republicans coming together to bring attention and to alert our fellow citizens that may not be paying quite as much attention to it, that this debt is a crisis and we need leaders who will tackle the debt in a responsible fashion.
Well, it is a tragedy. It's something that we focus on our show almost every day. But many people, and I'm going to go to Brian Plum, many people, Brian Plum, are very frustrated because we can't seem to get Republicans and Democrats on the Hill to get together to solve it. And my first question is, you go back to the original plan that came out by Simpson Bowles, which was sanctioned by President Obama, but then President Obama basically didn't enact any of their recommendations. And so why will Fix the Debt make a difference?
Right. Well, that's a great question. You know, what the Fix the Debt campaign is about launching more of a grassroots effort so people who are interested and are concerned will contact their elected officials, in the case of Congress, and I guess, too, with the Simpson-Bowles plan, a lot of people want to point to President Obama. We're not, Fix the Debt's not the blame game. We think this is a bipartisan problem, and it needs a bipartisan solution. So the way that we overcome that is we launch a grassroots effort. We encourage people to contact Congress. We have at the website, fixthedebt.org, over 350,000 people have now signed the petition urging Congress to take action. So in effect, that's the way we look at it, is we overcome the inertia by getting numbers and really using a common sense approach here. We realize that neither party is going to get everything at once. And I think we have to understand that, Delegate Moran and I suspect individually we have very different views of the role of government. But as part of this effort, we can come together and say, we need to fix this problem, and we're united to do that.
We like the use of the phrase common sense here, by the way. Common Sense News Time coming up on 7:45 here on the John Frederick Show. Editorial Director Steve Ray, along with our guest from Fix the Debt Virginia, former Democratic Party of Virginia Chairman Brian Moran, a delegate, of course, and former Republican Party of Virginia Treasurer and businessman Brian Plum. And as you've noted in your initial press release when the organization was put together in February, Virginia is the most at-risk state when it comes to potential job loss due to sequestration spending cuts, with over 200,000 jobs in the Commonwealth in jeopardy. Is the focus, and I'll direct this to Delegate Moran, is the focus primarily on getting this problem solved in Virginia, or are you having national impact, especially on Capitol Hill as it goes to not only spending but sequestration?
Well, Virginia is important in that we have one of the House leaders, Congressman Eric Cantor, who was at the table when these decisions are made. So that brings increased significance to Virginia. But then also the sequestration cuts that have just come into effect impact Virginia quite substantially. And our governor, Governor McDonnell, says we could be impacted by as many as, losing as many as 200,000 jobs. So there is some increased significance to Virginia, its proximity to Washington, of course, too, that increases our awareness of what is or isn't going on in Washington, like common sense. So, but we have good, we have Eric Cantor, but then we also have Mark Warner on the Democratic side, who is bringing attention appropriately to this issue. He joined a gang of six, which Democrats and Republican senators coming together to try to tackle this deficit and debt problem. So it is a national program, though. This affects our entire economy, frankly, the global economy. We are borrowing substantial sums right now, but we are enjoying a low interest rate. This could even get worse if those interest rates were to go up. And so we really want to tackle this now before any further delay.
Well, that's, Brian Moran, really the scary thing about this, because even a minimal increase in the interest rate would be economically catastrophic beyond what's happening now. But here's my question. You got two basic competing proposals now, one coming out of the Senate Democratic caucus led by Patty Murray and Harry Reid. Their budget doesn't balance the budget in perpetuity. Then you get the Paul Ryan budget in the Republican caucus in the House. That will balance it over a decade. So for the Democrats, Brian Moran, their proposal doesn't really deal with the debt. So what do you have to say to them?
Well, that's why we're bringing attention to this issue, so that they can be contacted by their local voters. They need to hear that the debt has to be a priority for our future, for our kids' future, for this economy to grow. The debt has to be a top priority. And the Senate plan that passed with Senator Murray's does offer a balanced approach. So you have more taxes, more revenue, but you also have spending cuts and entitlement reforms. The sequester attacked about 20% of the budget, and you had $85 billion cut, and that's why you had such draconian cuts, because it only addressed a fraction of our overall budget. That's going to be the big issue in how we go about entitlement reforms, which account for, either 2/3 of the spending in our budget. But hey, this is it's a bicameral legislature created by the founding fathers of Virginia. House passes a bill, Senate passes a bill, they come together, and they come up with a compromise. That has been lacking over the last several years. The two sides need to get together, Senate, the House, Democrats, Republicans, and come up with a plan that funds our investments, make sure that we take care of a social safety net, but at the same time addressing our debt that's growing at $2 billion a day.
And we will spare you, of course, the singing of "And That's How a Bill Becomes a Law." But
well, it's not rocket science, though.
That's true.
We've done it for over 200 years.
A quick follow-up for Brian Plum. Virginia's chapter is the latest of 23 other state chapters. How has the response been at FixTheDebt.org for especially responses from residents of the Commonwealth?
Well, I think across the board, as Delegate Moran indicated, and as you all said as well, Virginia is a highly at-risk state, and I think the people that I talk to and across the effort, I think most reasonable people agree that we have to come together to fix this problem. To Delegate Moran's point earlier about our low interest costs, when you look at the environment we're in, the Federal Reserve just released its weekly statistical release yesterday that shows its balance sheet's up to almost $3.2 trillion, up from about $870 billion in August of 2007. So obviously they've been very involved in keeping interest rates low, which they can't do forever. And as the debt matures and rates inevitably go up, we're going to be looking at a major crisis. And I think most Virginians understand it. I think in Virginia, we have a distinct history of working together, and I think recognizing the rich heritage that we have as Virginians. And so really, the expectation that I have for the Commonwealth is that our people will help lead this effort and join in to put pressure on Washington, D.C.
Back to Brian Moran, would it be fair to say that whatever comes out of the reconciliation between the House and the Senate, that Fix the Debt would only be interested in backing it if at the end of the day there was an end game and it balanced the budget? Because earlier you said, okay, Patty Murray has a balanced approach, but it doesn't balance the budget. And so I don't see the object of the Fix the Debt organization if you can't make it to the end game, which is at some point in time, this madness stops.
Well, you're attempting to get, folks in the negotiation. You put forward a plan, right? I mean, I think that is what's going on in Congress right now. And Fix the Debt, what we're trying to encourage is that it's a grassroots campaign, as Mr. Plum says. Let's get people engaged in the process. The more they become engaged, I think the more they're alerted they will be to the deficit and the growing debt problem. And that's where you find a solution. Pressure will be placed on Democrats and Republicans. The specific details, we're obviously going to have to leave them up to the individual members of Congress, but I think it's the individual in Virginia and across this country that needs to be aware of the path that we're going down is not sustainable. And we're not going to have the programs that we cherish if we continue to go down that program. I would say that to my fellow Democrats, and on the Republican side, we need to make a more balanced approach so it's not all cuts either, which is what we're experiencing with the sequestration. So I think both sides have to come together, and that's why Mr. Plum and myself are coming together as Democrats and Republicans, trying to offer a way that, hey, let's come together, let's try to figure this thing out in a responsible.
Well, I have to say, both to Brian Moran and Brian Plum, regardless of what the outcome is, I really want to commend the effort and say to the two of you gentlemen, I, for one, really appreciate your making the effort to get together and try to find an answer to what you have aptly hit on the head. This is a national crisis.
From the Fix the Debt Virginia organization, former Democratic Party of Virginia Chairman Brian Moran and former Republican Party of Virginia Treasurer and businessman Brian Plum, the website is fixthedebt.org, and that is the way to tap into over 300,000 citizen activists, including people on the Virginia State Committee that include Lieutenant Governor Bill Bolling, Chuck Robb, these two gentlemen, of course, Delegate Chairman Chris Saxman, and so on down the line. A great bit of involvement from everybody at all points in the political spectrum, and we thank you for the time this morning. We do.
I think it's hot.
Well, thank you. Thank you
it's
for
hot.
bringing attention to this issue and having us on. Thank you.